Welcome, everyone, to this briefing brought to you by the Israel Defense and Security Forum, IDSF. In Hebrew name is Bitronistim. IDSF is a leading Israeli organization advocating for strong national security to defend Israel. Thank you to all our reviewers and supporters for tuning into this briefing. It's a great privilege to be joined once again by Lieutenant Colonel Dr. Mordechai Kedar. Dr. Kedar, thank you so much for joining again.
Pleasure, Moshe, for having me here.
Absolutely. Let's start off with an easy question. Since October 7th and everything that transpired, do you see any shift or change in the way Arab countries in the Middle East or terrorist entities view Israel, view their capacity for terror?
Well, what I see around us are actually a two-way movement. On the popular media, usually the WhatsApp groups and the Telegram groups, I see that most of the people who talk about Israel actually make fun out of Israel. They take October 7th as a day which proved that Israel is no more than a paper tiger. Israel is weak. The Israeli army is made of plastic soldiers and plastic tanks and plastic airplanes because they didn't have any air force on October 7th. And we Arabs should take advantage of this fact and get rid of Israel altogether. You see it on right, left, and center, and all kinds of caricatures, articles, that the invincible army turned out to be something which is like spider web, as it states in the Quran. You see it very widely on the popular level. However, when you go to more serious people who, let's say, have some knowledge about army, about power, about using power, about all these things, they look at Israel today as a much more dangerous entity than it ever was. They use the expression al-dib al-majruh, the wounded bear. And you know, a bear, if you wound the bear, you better stay very, very far away from it, because it becomes dangerous. It's become vicious, and you don't want to be anywhere close to a wounded bear. And these people, those who understand something in what happens, look at Israel today as a wounded bear. Very dangerous to mess with. Of course, they don't deny the weakness which was projected by the absence, more or less, of the army on October 7th as an organization. Soldiers fought very bravely, on the personal level. But the army as an organization did not have any presence in October 7th. Unfortunately, we have to admit, this is what happened. But since then, everybody sees what happens with Gaza, the destruction, the casualties in Gaza, the fact that Israel hits Gaza in a way which nobody predicted or expected any time in the past. At least the impression, it's not really, but the impression that Gaza is totally destroyed. The fact is that maybe 50% of Gaza is destroyed, while the other parts, especially in the city of Gaza, are intact. But those do not appear in the media because, regular buildings which function regularly, it's not something which the media will show. But yeah, it's boring. Thank you so much, Robert. But definitely the destruction sites which you see in the western part of the city of Gaza, in other parts of the strip, definitely convinces many people in the Arab world and the Islamic world that Israel acts like a wounded bear. Add to this what Israel did in Hudaydah, in Yemen. Add to this what Israel is doing partially in Lebanon. As you know, Israel hits, not yet. Israel doesn't hit the main, let's say, power stations and water supply facilities, roads, bridges. The Lebanese infrastructure is still more or less intact. Israel tries to restrict its hits only to Hezbollah targets, and a little bit more means places which Hezbollah is hiding within. They don't have any life insurance when it comes to the Israeli Defense Force. So, yes, and don't forget that like 100, even more than 100,000 Lebanese were forced to run away from the south. A bit more than our citizens who were, evacuated from the north, from the near the border. But definitely in Lebanon, it is much worse the situation because, unlike Israel, the Lebanese government does not support and does not sponsor the hotels and the places which those people in Lebanon are renting because they cannot live in the homes in the south. So the agony in Lebanon is way much worse than it is here in Israel, and I'm not trying to downtone what is happening inside Israel. But in Lebanon, the situation is much more dire. And this situation, both in Gaza, what happened in Hudaydah, and what is happening in Lebanon, convinces, or those who understand the situation, understand that Israel now became much more dangerous than as they thought. And the bottom line is that Israel succeeds to restore, at least partially, its deterrence. And this might be the reason why the pro-Iranian militias from Syria, and they are like 20 groups of pro-Iranian armed militias in Syria are in Syria. Pro-Iranian militias are in Syria. Apparently, they don't try to invade Israel or to attack Israel in a large scale because they are afraid that Israel will treat Syria in the way which it treats Gaza or Lebanon or Hudaydah. So the bottom line is that within the professional echelons in the Arab and the Islamic world, definitely people understand that Israel now acts in a way which they did not expect. However, they all know also the situation of Israel in the world. That the world less and less supports Israel. We just heard that Canada froze like 30 licenses of export of components for weapons. I don't know what they did with the engines. I have no idea what are the items which we cannot import from Canada because of this. But this comes also along with all kinds of information about possible sanctions on Israel of exporting components of weapons from Britain, from France, I think. Also, I heard something like this. And add to this the situation of Israel in the ICC and the ICJ in Hague, which is a big problem because the investigation and the arrest warrants which are against Netanyahu, maybe are Gallant as well. So this on the means on one side, Israel succeeds to restore, at least partially, its deterrence, but on the other side, on the international arena, the status of Israel becomes worse. Add to this the lack of patience of the Americans to carry on with the war in Gaza and the situation of the hostages as well, as we getting closer and closer to the elections. Because Biden and Kamala Harris apparently want to put an end to this war as some kind of little achievement in order to save Hamas, implicitly to save Hamas, or even with the price of saving Hamas, maybe in order to appease the Muslim voters from Dearborn, Michigan, who only last week had a meeting with Kamala Harris, and they threatened not to go to vote if the administration continues to support Israel. So, in order to appease the Muslim voter in the United States of America, let alone Ilhan Omar or Rashida Tlaib and Bernie Sanders, who think that the war to begin with was not justified. So they become more and more impatient vis-a-vis this war, especially the Gazan chapter of the war, and they want to put an end to this, even with the price of leaving Hamas as a ruling power in Gaza. I'm not sure that they mind so much. They mind the war more than they mind the Hamas continues to rule Gaza. And this is another thing which Israel should take in account, because the closer we get to the elections in the States, the shorter is the patience of the American administration. Definitely, it's a short-term thinking. They think about the elections and nothing but. What happens beyond the elections, I'm not sure that they care so much. Right now, their objective is to win the elections, and afterwards we'll see what we are doing with Israel, with Gaza, with Hamas. And don't forget that the big elephant in the room is Iran. And Iran, so far, except for what they launched against Israel on April 14, they have not yet joined the war. All they do is encouraging, inciting, sponsoring, arming, training the proxies. So far, Hezbollah is in action, Hamas, Houthis. Iran keeps itself away in order to not to be exposed to sanctions. And the Iranians, as you might know, they invented the chess, the game. They know very well how to move the players on the board in order to protect the king. And they consider themselves to be the king. And the king usually doesn't move, or at least moves very little. And they think like chess players. And they are the king. So this is, I would say, maybe to fold into a nutshell how what this war is being viewed from the Arab and the Islamic world.
Thank you for sharing that. So, in the first few months of the war, there was relative calm in Judea and Samaria. And as you're suggesting, maybe that's this wounded bear theory that our enemies stayed at home because they knew the wounded bear was out seeking revenge, so to speak. But now that there's an uptick of incidents of terrorist attacks from Judea and Samaria, is that wounded bear no longer the imagery, the concern that they have, or are we losing that?
Look, definitely Israel today is in a higher gear than what it was before. The proof is that Israel today is using the Air Force, or at least drones, in order to get rid of the jihadists. Formerly, Israel sent troops on the ground, which exposed these troops, and definitely there were casualties. When you attack the terrorists from the air, the casualties are much less, and therefore, I think Israel actually now is on a higher gear. However, the problem is not only Judea and Samaria. The problem is with Jordan, which allows and enables the smuggling of weapons, of ammunition, of standard explosives, not explosives which somebody produces in his backyard. I'm talking about real explosives like C4, things like this, as we saw in several cases. And this is the problem. The fact that Jordan, which shares with us a border which is longer than 300 kilometers, the longest border which Israel has with any other country, even longer than the seashore here in Israel, this border is unsafe. And the Jordanians from their side do not do enough in order to stop smuggling of weapons and ammunition and explosive either from Syria to Jordan to the Palestinian Authority, or from Iraq. And I believe that they are from both Iraq and Syria, because in both there are Iranian proxies which are smuggling the whatever they do, and we are suffering from this.
Thank you. Let me zoom out, if we can, for a moment. Here in Israel, obviously, we view this war as the central issue right now in the Middle East. Certainly, it's the main issue that is affecting all of us who live in Israel. But I'm curious to know, in the broader Middle East, with the Shiites and the Sunnis, everything that is going on, is waging war against Israel their primary issue that they are dealing with? Meaning, you're an expert on Arab culture and Arab society. Are there bigger tensions at play in the Middle East that we're just a little piece of it, and somehow those other issues could come to the fore and minimize the threats to Israel?
Well, before I answer the question, I just saw a question of Albert, I'm not sure, about the flags behind me. Okay, one is the flag of Israel, and the other one with the green star inside is the flag of a district in Iran named Ahwaz, where the Arab minority is living. Is actually where the oil and the gas of the Iranians coming from. And the Arabs who live under the Iranian occupation, as they call it, since 1925, they are fighting for freedom. And I support them. And in my humble view, Iran will eventually fall apart according to ethnic lines, because Iran is comprised of many ethnic groups, Arabs with this flag, and there are Kurdish, and there are Baluchis, Azerbaijanis, Turkmens, in addition to the Persians, who are oppressing all the others. And in addition to these 6 groups, major groups, there are some 30 more groups, Bakhtiaris and Mazandaranis and Caspianis, Luris, Kashkais, and many others. They never became one nation, just like the Soviet Union, which was comprised of many ethnic groups, and Yugoslavia and Czechoslovakia. And just like those means Soviet Union, Czechoslovakia, and Yugoslavia, which fell apart in the end of the 80s, beginning of the 90s, according to ethnic lines, Iran will go through the same process. And one day we wake up to see that Iran is fragmented along ethnic lines. How do I know? This is what the minorities demand. So far, they are oppressed by the central regime, but they definitely want to, azadi, as they call in Persian, means freedom. They want freedom. And I have another proof that I'm correct. I published in Jerusalem Post an article about the future of Iran to be fragmented. It was, I think, in May, like 4 months ago. And it was published in English in Jerusalem Post. 2 days later, the Minister of Foreign Affairs of the Iranian government published an article against me, mentioning my name in his article. 300 words he dedicated to say that Mordechai Kedar is talking nonsense. He doesn't know what happens in Iran. The people are loving each other, are sticking to each other. They will fight against anyone who calls to take Iran apart. Iran is one nation. Forget about this. Mordechai Kedar is talking nonsense. 300 words. And I'm asking you, Moshe, if I, talking nonsense, would the man write one word against me? Would he dedicate 15 minutes to write something against me? No. The Minister of Foreign Affairs in Iran has some things to do. Okay.
Let me ask you a quick question. Is that your Jerusalem Post article?
Moshe, listen. The fact that the man felt that he needs to sit down and write a 300-word article against me comes from the fact that I touched a very aching nerve, open nerve in their political body. And this is a proof for me that I was right. The fact that the man felt that he needs to refute what I said. Okay. What do you ask?
Oh, I want to share that article with our viewers. Is that your March article, The Secret to Taking Down Iran, that was in the Jerusalem Post?
Excellent. Yes, it was a March. Yes, it
wonderful. I'm going to share that with everyone. Okay, keep going.
So, unfortunately, neither Israel nor other countries worked on this issue on supporting the oppressed minorities in Iran. And as you know, we are talking about democratic countries, Europe, in America, who believe in human rights, believe in political freedoms, believe in the ban on oppression. And all of a sudden, when it comes to Iran, nobody supports those minorities. And it is very easy today to support them, because once, if you wanted to support a minority, you had to collect weapons and ammunition and send it to them at night. Today, you don't even have to do this. All you have to do is to raise a telephone from, let's say, from Honduras or from Colombia. Today you can have on any telephone, you can have whatever SIM which you can put inside. And to call a weapon dealer in Iraq and tell him, please collect 1,000 AK-47 and million bullets, bring them to this and this place, and you pay him by Bitcoin. Who will know who you are and where you are talking from? Okay? So today it's much easier to support these minorities. And unfortunately, the democratic countries prefer to preserve the Iranian regime and the Iranian unity rather than pushing it to the same process which the Soviet Union went through, in addition to Yugoslavia and Czechoslovakia. And this is what I think the world, or I think history, will not forgive the Western world for allowing Iran to become such a monster which threatens Saudi Arabia, threatens the Emirates, threatens Bahrain, already destroyed Iraq, Syria, Lebanon, Yemen, Gaza by its behavior. And not only this, as much as I heard, there were all kinds of cash money which was given to the Iranians in the last decade, the previous decade. So those who support Iran, those who sponsor Iran, should really be tried by history for allowing this monster to become such an incontrollable state, to a degree that today they support Russia with ballistic missiles and drones in order to crush the Ukrainians. To that degree, Iran became such a pariah state, and unfortunately, with the consent of the Western world.
Lieutenant Colonel Dr. Mordechai Kedar, thank you so much for this briefing, for joining me, for sharing all of that with our viewers.
Let me just add one point.
Please, please.
During November, I'll be in the United States of America in a speaking tour. I still have a couple of days open. If one of the listeners wants to arrange something in his place, please get in touch with me. My email is Kedar, Kedar, at Newsrael, NEWSRAEL.com. Thank you so much, Moshe.
Absolutely. Thank you. I put the your email address in the chat here in Zoom, so everyone is, of course, welcome to get in touch with you and learn from you live in person in their communities. Thank you to all of our viewers. Thank you to all of our supporters for tuning into this briefing. We will be back with you next week, Monday, 10 a.m. Eastern Time, 5 p.m. here in Israel. Until then, stay safe, stay strong. Take care, everyone.